the 20s. It was an age of miracles, it was an age of art, it was an age of excess, it was an age of satire, said F. Scott Fitzgerald. It was a time of utter confidence, when life was like the race in Alice in Wonderland, with a prize for everyone. High spirits, flappers, lavish musical comedies. Suddenly, it is all over. Wall Street lays an egg.
They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread?
Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower to the sun, brick and rivet and lime. Once I built a tower, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once in khaki suits, gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodly-dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell. I was the kid with a drum. Say, don't you remember, they called me Al. It was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember, I'm your pal. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once in khaki suits, gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodly-dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell. I was the kid with a drum. Say, don't you remember, you called me Al. It was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember, I'm your pal.
always talk about something being a tough act to follow, but that was a wonderful act to follow. Am I right? Good evening. I'm Mike Wallace from the Gotham Center for New York City History, and on behalf of Director Suzanne Wasserman and myself, I want to welcome you to this celebration of that amazing song on its 75th anniversary. It was, of course, the anthem of the Great Depression of the 1930s, and clearly it still has tremendous power, though let's hope that we don't have to bring it back as the anthem of the Great Subprime Depression of the 20s. Tonight, we're going to learn how the song was created and what makes it work. Then we'll hear a host of songs written since the 30s with lyrics by Yip Harburg and music by such brilliant composers as Burton Lane and Harold Arlen, songs that make clear why Yip became known as Broadway's social conscience. To get us started on our musical historical journey, it's my pleasure to introduce to you one of today's great lyricists, a man who in works like Fiddler on the Roof has carried on Yip's tradition of bringing a social conscience to Broadway. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheldon Harnick.
When I came to New York in 1950, I was introduced to Yip. He was my hero, and he gave me wonderful advice, which I followed. I loved him, I loved his work. So I was thrilled when about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, Yip's son Ernie called. He and his wife Deena Rosenberg said that they were preparing a deluxe Yip Harburg songbook that would, with a selection of about 200 of Yip's lyrics. Would I look through it, and if I wanted to comment on a dozen, 2 dozen lyrics, would I do that? I was thrilled. So I went through the book, and I did 35 comments. It was like a long paragraph about 35 different songs. One of them was, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? So I want to read to you what I wrote for that book. The year this song was introduced, 1932, was the low point of the Depression. I was 8 years old. Since I first heard those lyrics on the radio, I have heard them countless times. And yet, when I looked at the lyrics closely, for the purposes of these comments, I found that I didn't know them as well as I thought I did. Perhaps overfamiliarity had caused me to lose sight of what it is that gives this song its power. In my memory, I thought the song was simply the plaint of an individual named Al. Now I've rediscovered that Al is everyone who's been a farmer, a track layer, a construction worker, a soldier, and by extension, any working stiff anywhere. But somewhat surprisingly, this average Joe is also capable of phrases like, I was building a dream. I made it race against time. I built a tower to the sun. And then there's that remarkable neologism, Yankee Doodle-Dee-Dum. Blue collar Al may have been, but he was also a poet. The song brilliantly captured a moment in time, but it was Yip Harburg, the poet, who transcended the moment, expressing feelings that continue to affect us today. Deena asked if I would also say a few words about my reaction or my feelings about the music. I'm sure others will do that too, but here's my take on what Jay Gorney accomplished. Even though the song as a whole has a melancholy minor key feeling, the very first musical phrase rises in a positive manner as the singer proudly states, once I built a railroad. But in the next two phrases, the melody descends, then descends again, as though the singer's confidence is faltering. Then it sinks lower and lower, still conveying the singer's embarrassment as he finds himself forced to ask for a handout. In the middle of the song, as the singer recalls his military service, for a moment, the music is an odd mixture of major and minor, as though to express both the singer's pride and his bewilderment that his service has been so ill-rewarded. In the second half of this section, the music collapses back into its minor tonality, but then rises dramatically to a pitch of despair. The final stanza recapitulates the melancholy of the first two stanzas, but then rises dramatically once again to a final cry of despair and humiliation. Brother, can you spare a dime? In the short space of 32 bars, Jay Gorney and Yip Harburg have achieved the impact of a full-blown operatic aria. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Yip's son, Ernie Harburg.
Well, I'm going to give you an old-fashioned slideshow here, if it works. And I want to tell you about the tale of three songs. Now, you've already heard the third song by Bing Crosby and Catherine Russell. And I want to ask, what is a song? Was a great song? And where did the dime song come from? All great works of art have a kind of serendipitous unfolding. The artist moved from one chance place to another, and I'm going to give you a brief historical look at this. But first we have to see what Yip says as he's standing next to his 1935 Chrysler with the rumble seat, if you remember. Words make you think thoughts. Music makes you feel a feeling. But a song makes you feel a thought. Now, the only analogous that comes to mind to me that is what Yip was driving at was if you take two parts of hydrogen gas and a part of oxygen, put them in a place where you can adjust the temperature and pressure, and boom, you get water. Water does not reveal the components. It has a totally different and unique properties. And that's what a song is. A song, once it's put together and merges, becomes a thing in and of itself. All right, but how do we get to Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? We start off in the early 20s in Broadway, where the territory was being developed, and in the middle of the 20s, there was an average of 53 musical comedies. They went like flies, and that was about the life span. Now, in the 30s, of course, it went from 53 down to about 12 or 14. Next, we see the two gentlemen who originally came from Buffalo and migrated to New York, became New Yorkers, and became the dominant producers on Broadway. And now one of the many shows that they did was a review called Americana in 1926 with a political columnist called J.P. McAvoy. And that was a great success. So 2 years later, of course, they tried it again, Americana, and it flopped in 10 performances. This is the history of Broadway. Now, when the Depression started, I think it was Lee Schubert, on your right there, called J.P. McAvoy in again, and McAvoy decided that they had to do a review with a political theme. This had never happened on Broadway before, and they would use the theme of the forgotten man, which Franklin Roosevelt had mentioned in his campaign for president that year. So they decided to have a songwriting team to do all the show, which was unusual. Usually they had a dozen songwriting teams and multiple songs, and one was Vincent Youmans, T for Two fame, and the other was Yip Harburg, whose business had gone bankrupt and had been induced by his friend Ira Gershwin to become a lyricist, and had been working for 3 or 4 years with Jay Gorney. Then came the crisis. Now, what happened was that Americana production deferred. Vincent Youmans has withdrawn as composer of the show and has not yet been replaced. However, Yip tells us that humans had a slight drinking problem, and he absconded with the $5,000 advance, and they were going to call the show off. And at this point, Yip rose to the occasion as he usually did. And he became what they called a muscle on the show, as he did throughout the rest of his career. He was an aggressive executive whose own business had gone bankrupt, as I say, learning to change from a poet to becoming a lyricist. And he had Jay Gorney as a mentor for his music, and Ira Gershwin was a mentor for his lyrics. So what Yip did was to bring in a number of composers. And one was Jay Gorney, of course, a young Harold Arlen, a young Vernon Duke, who was then, I think, Vladimir Dukelski, and a young Burton Lane, Henry Subain, Richard Myers, Everett Miller. And what Yip did was to bring them in one at a time and ask them to play for him their trunk tunes. Every composer has a number of tunes they can't publish, it can't become a song, and they carry it around with them. So by the time he got to Jay Gorney, Jay played a few tunes, and then he sang a torch song. And it was Yip's personal characteristic never to criticize a composer during the creative process. So what would he do? He would go to the window and he'd look out the window and not say anything. And eventually the composer would understand and he'd go on to the next tune and the next. Finally, on the third or fourth one, Yip stopped, turned around and said, "Would you play that tune again?" And we're going to have David, and we're going to...
I will go on crying big blue tears since you said we were through. I will go on crying big blue tears till all the seas are blue.
All right, now that song was not publishable. But you recognize the music. Now, during that time, and you saw one shot before, Rockefeller, the multimillionaire, was going around, and this is absolutely true, giving out dimes to children. Now, it's said that as the Depression got worse, he gave out nickels. But that's a rumor. But the whole thing is so ludicrous that it fit perfectly into J.P. McAvoy's satirical review. So Yip got busy, and we have song number 2.
Say, I'm making millions while you exist. Help me make life sublime. Help me be a great philanthropist. Brother, here's a brand new dime.
All right, well, you get the idea. That was for the review. However, both Jay and Yip were born in 1896, came from Russian parents who were immigrants, were dedicated socialists, and angry at the poverty of capitalism. They really felt that this tune deserved a little better lyric. And Jay now tells us of how the song got a title, a new title. And a title is like an equation. You can derive everything from it. Once you get it, that both the composer and the lyricist come together and start collaborating on it.
We had this tune, and we were laboring to find a title for it. The melody was rather masculine in mood, and we thought to write this tune as a torch song about a gal who'd lost her man wasn't news anymore. It was unfresh. And conversely, about a man who'd lost his gal, that certainly wasn't news. but because the melody had a certain plaintive note, we wondered what it was that a man would be sad about that he might sing about. We found no answer to it until after several hours, we walked out into Central Park and humming the tune, trying to find a title. Yip had some lines, and all of a sudden, a young man, a rather nice-looking young man, nicely dressed, but his collar up, his coat collar up, and his hat pulled down over his eye, turned to us with his face away from it and says, "Buddy, can you spare a dime?" I don't remember whether the man got his dime or not, but if anyone can remember this and wants to claim that dime today, he was worth much more than, because he gave us the title. Yip got it immediately and we knew it. That's it. And Yip went right home.
And began to work. And we have his notes and how they developed. But now, here's Yip, side of the story. This is years later, of course, but nevertheless, Yip had this to say. Jay and I were well aware of at that time of what was wrong with our whole economic system. That the man who builds, the man who creates, is not always the man who gets the profit. So that bewildered person in the street is now saying, I built the railroad. I built the tower. I went to war for this country. Why are my hands empty? And I think what made that song popular and great, and why it's lasting now, is that it's still asking the universal question of why does the man who produces not share in the wealth? And at that point, they went ahead and they did the song. Now, there's 4 or 5 songs listed down there on the bottom of the cover sheet, but there were 9 in the show, and Yip wrote the lyric to 7 with 5 different composers. And however, after they got the score, Yip delivered the score, Lee and J.J. Schubert had listened to all of the songs intended for the show. And J.J. wanted to throw out the dime song. Now, they didn't talk to each other. One sat over there and the other sat there, and they sent notes back to each other. And finally, Lee, very frustrated, got up and said, why? Why don't you want this song in the show? And J.J., not to be outdone, also arose to his full height and said, because it's too sordid. Now that's morbid and sordid, conflated, all right? But Lee had the final word, so they kept it in the show. Otherwise, they'd have thrown it out, and it would never have got out on the radio because songs were censored in those days. You don't have a song that directly addressed the Depression. Never. Not one. But you did have Happy Days Are Here Again, Life Is Just a Bowl of Cherries, and you had your torch songs, etc. The only way you could get it out was through the Broadway show. And then another event happened. Bing Crosby heard it and instantly picked it up, and you heard him sing it, and it instantly rose to the top 10 on the sheet music, and they didn't have a hit parade at that time, but they had sheet music, they had radio, they had band leaders, and Variety put it in the top 10 for the next number of months. And then in the show, this is how it looked on the stage, and Max Weber, who was in the chair facing the audience here, was the one who sang the song. It stopped the show. The crowd was just wild. They rose up and they applauded, and it became a tremendous hit immediately. And even in the advertisement, Brooks Atkinson of the Times, up there on the top right, said if Mr. Hoover had asked for a song instead of a poem, the other day, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" would have been what the president ordered. That's not true, because they tried to take it off the air. It was too provocative, all right? But it was too late, because it had already gotten out. As I say, the only song that seriously addressed the Depression. And finally, we have the artwork, the music, and the words. And how do the melody and these words merge, synchronize, synergize into this great song? And here are David and Deena. We'll talk a little bit about it, this mysterious matter of creating a great song.
Welcome. By hearing the song and hearing what Sheldon said and hearing what Ernie said, you've heard a lot about things that David and I discuss a lot, but I think we can tell you a few more things that you might find interesting. Ernie cited the phrase of Yip's that he often used to describe a song. He said, music makes you feel feelings, words make you think thoughts, a song makes you feel a thought. And he elaborated on that a little bit, and I think that's a good introduction to what we want to say. So he said, the magic in song only happens when the words give destination and meaning to the music, and the music gives wings to the words. Together as a song, they go places you've never been before. So I think we should start, maybe David, with you talking about the background of the music.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the music. Sheldon said it beautifully, a lot about why the music is effective in the song. It was written, Jay Gorney said he was inspired to write it by having remembered a melody of a lullaby that his Russian Jewish grandmother mother had sung to him when he was a boy. They had both of the guys, Yip and Jay, had a personal attachment to this kind of music. I mean, it's Eastern European music. You hear this all over the place. It's in the Israeli national anthem. Irving Berlin wrote a song called The Russian Lullaby. Every night you'll hear her croon a Russian lullaby. That upward melody. And it's in a lot of classical music and stuff like that. It's an unusual song being in a minor key. There aren't many American pop standards that are in minor keys. And I think almost all of them that begin in a minor key end up in a major key. If you think of My Funny Valentine ends with Stay Little Valentine, stay. They get to the sort of comfort of a major key. Blue Skies starts in a minor key, but ends in a major key. This song starts in a minor key, ends in a minor key, in 1932. I loved what Ernie was saying, you know, about there being nobody else addressed the devastation directly. I mean, when we heard her sing that, I was like, oh, can you imagine hearing that in 1932? Somebody coming out and saying that? They must have gone nuts. So we have that upward melody that comes back down. It's what we call an AABA song, the structure of the music. So we have that first section, da 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 da, brother, can you spare a dime? Then the music is repeated exactly, A. Then there's a contrasting B section. We call that the bridge. It's contrasting in music and in text in the lyric. And then normally in a song, you would come back to the A section. But what Jay Gurney does was he flips it on its head. So instead of coming from the bottom up, on the final A section, he goes, ba-da-da-da-da-da. He reverses it. So it is like an operatic aria. It's so powerful. He gets you up there during that bridge, gets you up there, and then ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then back down again. It's filled with beautiful music. Something that's interesting to me about why a minor key moves you in certain ways. When I was a little boy in Pittsburgh, and my piano teacher was teaching me about music, and she would say, major keys are happy keys. Minor keys are sad keys, she would say to me. And when I was in music school, I learned they taught us a little bit about the physics of sound. And there's something called the overtone series, which involves the fact that when I hit that note, on most instruments, when you hit a note, you're actually hearing more than that note. The physics of sound causes a series of other vibrations to happen, and that note is in what you're hearing, subliminally. There's a little trick you can do on the piano, I won't do it right now, where you can actually hear what's being vibrated after you hold that. So you're hearing that on a naturally vibrating instrument. It's not right, somehow. So you hear that and you say, something's wrong, something's sad, something's scary, that kind of a thing. So, there's just a natural response to it being in a minor key that, whether they knew that or not, they wrote it in a minor key. And Deena's going to talk a little bit about how the lyrics meld with that.
Yeah, well, in terms of the minor key relating to their early experiences, Jay and Yip both had very traumatic early years. Jay's family came from Russia and had to leave, I think, because of a pogrom. And I think one of his brother's ears was cut off, and it was just a horrible, horrible experience and time for them. And so firsthand he experienced that kind of shocking reality. And Yip's family, when they got to the United States, also were extremely poor. His parents worked in sweatshops, and they were in a cold water flat, one-room cold water flat. And later on, in later years, Yip said, "The chill of poverty never left my bones." And I like to think about that as if the music in an AABE song is sort of the personality of the song, and the lyrics are what tell a story. The music, of course, has to tell that story as well, but if you didn't have words, you would know exactly what the story is. So you repeat the A music, AA, but you don't repeat the lyrics. The story moves on. So what's the story in the lyric? Well, you start with "Once I built a railroad," okay, and then the fellow singing made it run. Okay, that's kind of concrete. Then he made it race against time. That's a metaphor. So you're going from an ordinary kind of lyric or speech to something very poetic. Goes back, "Once I built a railroad, now it's done, brother, can you spare a dime?" So the race against time was that aspiration, that hope, coming down again, as Sheldon spoke of. Okay, and I hope I get this right now. In rehearsal, I did this the wrong way, but okay. A railroad runs horizontally, right? Okay. In the next A section, the person singing is building a tower, and that's something going up. So in a way, you're accelerating, or you're doing something even more incredible. You're not just going across, you're going up vertically to the sun. Again, a metaphor. Something unreachable, to the sun. Race against time. Built a tower to the sun. And then it's brick and rivet and lime, but I did it, I worked, and then here I am. Brother, can you spare a dime? The stakes keep getting raised. We get to this bridge section. Music is different, as a variation, as David said, but it's also march-like. Okay, so what did the person singing the song do? He went to war for the country with all the other people who went to war. He not only built the railroad and the tower, he fought for the country, and many people died for the country. And he's getting more and more into that feeling of, look, what's going on here? I built and I fought, and at the very end of that bridge, he says, "I was the kid with the drum. So though he's used the word I, the lyric person singing the song, once I built a railroad, it's not that specific. But I was the kid with the drum, that's kind of specific. Who was I amongst all these soldiers? I was the kid with the drum, and the bridge is going up there. Do you want to play, David, how it's going up there?
Yeah, it gets more and more personal, right?
Right.
Full of that Yankee doodly-dum, 500,000 boots went slogging through hell. I was the kid with the drum.
Now,
Say, don't you remember?
and what happens is, say, don't you remember? Now we're talking about I and you, okay? There's a me and there's a you. There are two people, not just every man and every woman, but say, don't you remember? They called me Al. He's got a name. It was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember? I'm your pal. You know, we're friends. Okay, and then instead, at the very, very end of the song, instead of using the word brother, it's buddy, can you spare a dime, as Catherine so beautifully delivered it. But then, you know, there's a little bit of anger, and because you're not just my brother, you know, we're in the brotherhood of man, you're my buddy, you're my pal. My name is Al. Okay, now, of course, a great song is going to take something particular and, in its particularity, be universal at the same time. So, sure, it's a song that the whole country, the third of the population who didn't have jobs, and most everybody else could identify with, see was happening around. But they could think it as a specific person, and they could see it as the general picture. And to reiterate, there was no other song written like this, so specifically about this drastically, dramatically awful period in our history. I want to point out now that year 1932, and so today, this month, is the 75th anniversary of Brother, Can You Spare a Dime. It's also the 75th anniversary of two other songs that Yip Harburg wrote with two different composers. One is April in Paris with Vernon Duke, which I'm sure many of you know. It is a love song, but it's a rather plaintive love song, and it doesn't get to love till the last line of it. Okay, but the other one is a very different kind of love song, if it's a love song at all, and that song is It's Only a Paper Moon, which is basically telling you what the world is like, and then alludes to one person relating to another, and that would make something worth it, but the world is not a very good place. And so
those three songs came out in the same year. Can you imagine?
What?
I said those three songs came out in the same year, beginning of Yip's career.
Nobody knew who Yip Harburg was up to that point, and as Ernie said, he was in business in the 20s while his friend from school, from college, from City College, Ira Gershwin, had become a famous lyricist, and they were still close friends, but Yip went into business. He had gotten a bachelor in science because he had to get his parents out of that cold water flat. So the whole time in the 20s, he was writing poems and wanting to write songs, but not doing it. He wanted to make sure that that business was there, and they did indeed move out of that cold water flat and out of the sweatshops. But then what happened was the crash came and the business totally went bust. And I think you've said in various ways that he left the, I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes, the fantasy of big business to enter the reality of musical theater. So it's kind of yeah, thank you, Ernie, for the coaching there. Yes. So what we want to hear now is Yip himself tell a little bit about the song and what it means, and then it will be sung by his grandson, Ben Harburg.
Not only every artist, but every person is confronted with two things in his life. His drive is to be related to the universe, but that's a hard thing because there are so many stars. and it's very hard to grasp that relationship. So his next best thing is to be related to humanity, and there are a lot of people, and that's hard too. So if he can identify himself and relate with one person, he will relate with all of humanity, and then he will relate with all the stars. And I think it's summed up in
it's only a paper moon sailing over a cardboard sea, but it wouldn't be make-believe if you believe in me. Oh, it's only a cot in the sky hanging over a nylon tree, but it wouldn't be make-believe if you believe in me. Without your smile, it's a honky-tonk parade. Without your love, it's a melody played in a penny arcade. It's a Barnum and Bailey world, phony as it can be, but it wouldn't be make-believe if you believe in me.
So for the next 50 years, till the very end of his life, Yip continued to write songs with great composers, some of the greatest in American musical theater history. We've mentioned Harold Arlen and Burton Lane among those. And for those 50 years, Yip as lyricist continued to be Broadway's social conscience. So we're going to kind of take you through the decades and show you some of the songs and parts of the shows that continued out of that start with Brother Can You Spare a Dime.
I too was a fellow hitchhiker on the great American Dream Machine. It was a swell ride, somewhat like a roller coaster, up to high, full peaks and down to low, bare bottoms. But a swell ride. Hell-bent for happiness on a road which we thought was paved with gold, but alas, turned out to be a yellow brick road. So I, as a lyrical son of an immigrant, saw this country with the eyes of a worshiper and the heart of a Shavian poet, a troubadour. I capsulated its follies, twitted its foibles, chronicled its fears, and sang its hopes. Always I saw this land under a rainbow umbrella and a banner that waved with humor and humanity. I had faith, and still have, that in times of cataclysmic crisis, there's always a Jefferson, a Lincoln, or a Roosevelt to rise out of the silent majority and turn it into a singing majority.
Now, the first two songs, the earliest one is called Free and Equal Blues, and it has music by Earl Robinson. It was written in 1944, and I'm not sure if everybody knows this. I didn't way back when. But anyway, during World War II, when blood banks were taking blood for the wounded soldiers, white blood was segregated from black blood, and black blood was given to black soldiers, and white blood was given to white soldiers. Absurd as that was and is. So Yip and Earl Robinson wrote a song about this, and Steve will sing it for you.
I went down to that St. James Infirmary, and I saw some plasma there. And I ups and asked that doctor, man, was a donor dark or fair? The doctor laughed a great big laugh and puffed right in my face. He said, a molecule is a molecule, son, and the damn thing has no race. And that was news, yes, that was news. That was very, very, very special news. 'Cause ever since that day, I got those free and equal blues. I mean, I heard that doc declare the plasma in that test tube there could be white man, black man, yellow man, red. That's what he said. The doc put down his doctor book and gave me a very scientific look. He spoke out plain and clear and rational. Metabolism is international. Yes, he rigged up his microscope with some Berlin blue blood. And by gosh, it was the same as Chungking, Kuibayshev, Chattanooga, Timbuktu blood. Why, them Aryans who think they're noble don't even know the corpuscle is global. Trying to disunite us with their racial supremacy, flying in the face of old man chemistry. What? Taking all the facts and trying to twist them, but you can't overthrow the circulatory system. And that was news, yes, that was news. That was very, very, very special news. 'Cause ever since that day, I got those free and equal blues. So listen, you African and Indian and Mexican, Mongolian, Tyrolean and Tartar. The doctor's right behind the Atlantic Charter. The doc's behind the new brotherhood of man, as prescribed in San Francisco and Potsdam and Yalta and Tehran. Makes no difference if you're Kelly, if you're Lopez, if you're Cohen, if you're Swenson, Jones, or Litvinov. Every man, everywhere is the same when he's got his skin off. And that's the news, yes, that's the news. That's the free and equal news.
Yip, and as I said, one of his greatest composers, Burton Lane, and I think Lynn is in the audience tonight, his wife, so I'm very glad she could be here. They wrote a song for this celebration of the civil rights movement, Freedom is the Word.
Freedom is the word that won't bow down. Freedom is the word that wears a crown. When you're on that march to kingdom come, freedom is the word that bangs a drum. Freedom is the word no rain can rust. Freedom is the word no fist can bust. Freedom is the word no bars can hold. Freedom can't be bound or bought or sold. Freedom, freedom, like the sun, everywhere for everyone. Freedom is the word that lights our goals. Freedom is the bell that liberty tolls. Freedom is the password to all our souls. A world with hope on the wing. Let it ring, let it ring, let it ring. Freedom is the word that lights our goals. Freedom is the bell that liberty tolls. Freedom is the password to all our souls. A world with hope on the wing. Let it ring, let it ring, let it ring.
Going back a bit to Yip Harburg and Burton Lane's classic and landmark show, probably the most political show ever to hit Broadway, before, during, or since, written in 1947, Finian's Rainbow. And in this show, I'm glad I hear some sounds of appreciation here. The score is a classic score. I think I'm not speaking as a prejudiced person. I mean, no pun intended, in saying that there is not a bad song in that score. In fact, every single song is great. And you think, how is the next song going to top the next one? And then you hear one, and then you hear another song, and it's still great. Okay, fine, it's a great score. Why is it a landmark? It brought up really important political issues of the day and of today. Took right on the Southern racism, black supremacy, so on. Took on the great divide between the rich and the poor. Managed to put in some whimsy and fantasy, as all of us have been talking about, that Yip liked to do, yet really hit these issues on the head. Not like if you have a message sent for Western Union, but in a way that was at once satiric, powerful, and everlasting. So now we're going to hear 3 songs from Finian's Rainbow, and at this time we're going to call on members of the Rainbow Troupe. The Yip Harburg Foundation started a group of young performers called the Rainbow Troupe, and they're going to come up now. I want to introduce them as they do. Or are you coming up now? Yeah, okay. Led by Genevieve DeSanto and Ben Harburg. And then we have Jenna and Nereda Vega and Anthony Ortiz. And Stephen Sherry will join them.
When the idle poor become the idle rich, you'll never know just who is who or who is which. Won't it be rich when everyone's poor relative becomes a Rockefeller tip and palms no longer itch? What a switch when we all have ermine and plastic teeth. How will we determine who's who underneath?
And when all your neighbors are upper class,
You won't know your Joneses from your Astors.
Let's toast the day we drink that drinky up, but with a little pinky up, the day on which the idle poor become the idle rich.
When a rich man doesn't want to work, he's a bon vivant.
Yes, he's a bon vivant.
But when a poor man doesn't want to work, he's a loafer, he's a lounger, he's a lazy good-for-nothing.
He's a jerk.
when a rich man loses on a horse, isn't he the sport?
Oh, isn't he the sport?
But when a poor man loses on a horse, he's a gambler, he's a spender, he's a lowlife,
he's a reason for divorce. When a rich man chases after days, he's a man about town, a man about town. But when a poor man chases after days, he's a bounder, he's a rounder, he's a rotter, and a lot of dirty names. You'll never know just who is which. When the idle poor becomes the idle rich. When the idle poor becomes the idle rich. When the idle poor become the idle rich. You'll never know just who is who or who is which. No one will see the Irish or the Slav in you, for when you're on Park Avenue, Cornelius and Mike look alike.
When poor
annuities will hide those incongruities in crooks from Abercrombie Fitch.
Won't it be fun when worry is done and money is hay? That's the time things will come your way. On that great, great come and get it day.
I'll get my gal that calico gown. I'll get my mule that acre of ground. 'Cause word has come from Gabriel's horn. The earth beneath your plow is abundant and now it's yours.
Glory time's coming for to stay. On that great, great come and get it day. Come and get it, come and get it, come and get it, come and get it.
Says
come and get it, 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 come
a mighty morning is nigh.
come and get it, come and get it.
Universal 4th of July. Gonna get your freedom and
high. Bells will ring in every steeple. What a day for people in overalls. Come you free and you equal people. Come and get your gravy and 2 meatballs. On that great come and get it day. Won't it be fun when worry is done and money is hay? That's the time things will come your way. On that great, great come and get it day. My gown will be a calico gown. My feet will dance all over the town.
Come from Gabriel's horn. The earth beneath your plow is abundant and now is yours.
Glory time's coming for to stay. On that great, great come and get it and keep it and share it. Come and get it
As the decades went on, Yip couldn't always stay as cheerful and satiric, though he never gave up hope. As we said, it was always a question of hope in the hardest of times. He said it himself, that even when we're in the midst of cataclysmic matters, that he always retained a hope. He did write one other song that was not in a minor key, actually, right? But was very much about what might happen if nuclear warfare or nuclear energy were used for the wrong purposes. He did write a poem about it in which he attempted to have some humor, and it's called "An Atom a Day Keeps the Doctor Away." And I'm going to attempt to pronounce it correctly. We've licked pneumonia and TB and plagues that used to mock us. We've got the virus on the run. The smallpox cannot pock us. We found the antibodies for the Staphylostreptococcus. But oh, the universal curse from Cuba to Korea, the bug of bugs that bugs us still and begs for panacea. Oh, who will find the antidote for pentagonorrhea? as I said, though, in the late 70s, near the end of his life, he did write this one more song that is a kind of a despairing song. It was, though, followed, or at the same time, written with songs that hoped that hope would rise through the ashes, and as I said, he always came down on the side of hope. So we'll hear 3 songs now, first in the depths and then building up to the hopes.
Out of the fallen leaves, the autumn world over. Out of the shattered rose that will smile no more. Out of the embers of blossoms and ashes of clover, spring will bloom one sweet morning. This is the cry of life the winter world over. Sing me no sentiment but a bright encore. For out of the flags and the palms buried under the clover, spring will bloom one sweet morning. One sweet morning, the rose will rise to wake the heart and make it wise. This is the cry of life the winter rolled over. Sing me no sentiment but a bright encore. For out of the flags and the bombs buried under the clover, spring will bloom, peace will come, one sweet morning.
Oh, the Lord looked down from his holy place, said, Lordy me, what a sea of space, what a place to launch the human race. So he built him a boat for a mixed up crew, with eyes of black and brown and blue. And that's how come that you and I got just one world and just one sky. We're in the same boat, brother. Yes, it's the same boat, brother. And if you shake one and it's gonna rock the other, it's the same boat, brother.
The storm and grief, past many a rock and many a reef.
What got them going was a great belief that they had to learn to navigate.
For the human race was special phrase.
If we don't want to land in Jonah's shoes, we'd better be mates on this here cruise. Oh, the boiler blew somewhere in Spain. The keel was crushed in the far Ukraine, and the steam rolled out from Oregon to Maine. If a hatch takes fire in China Bay, Pearl Harbor's deck's gonna blaze away. We're in the same boat, brother. Yes, it's the same boat, brother. And we must live with each other in the same
So we like to end this evening's program by going back to the song that we are paying tribute to tonight, the 75th anniversary of Brother Can You Spare a Dime. But we also want to point out to you that that song of the Great Depression, of the Hardest of Times, written in 1932 by Yip Harburg and Jay Gorney, was, as I said, written at the early part of the 30s, and at the end of the 30s, Yip again, this time with composer Harold Arlen, wrote another timeless song that, again, was of the time, but is timeless, and gives out the hope, even in hard times. So there's the depression, and then there's the hope in hard times.
In 1930, when the Dream Machine was derailed and the engine wrecked, I saw executives driving taxis, engineers selling apples, skilled workers and veterans standing in bread lines. They were not people in revolt or angry, but baffled, bewildered that this big, powerful dream machine could collapse so utterly. The lyric I wrote to Jay Gorney's music was not for an underling asking for a handout, but for a proud man asking a vital question.
They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed them on.
Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time.
Once I built a tower to the sun, built a brick and mortar and lime.
Khaki suits, gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodle-dum.
Once in khaki suits, gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodle-dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell, and I was the kid with the drum. Say, don't you remember, you called me Al? It was Al all the time. Say, don't you remember, I'm your pal. Buddy, can you spare a dime?
In times like these, do you think that love can find a way? With all the lights dimmed out, with darkness all about.
In times like these, will we ever find a dream so fair?
Is there a silver lining that keeps on shining somewhere?
Sky.
get it day. Won't it be fun when worry is done and money is hay? That's the time things will come your way. On that great, great come and get it day.
I'll get my gal that calico gown. I'll get my mule that acre of ground. 'Cause word has come from Gabriel's horn. The earth beneath your plow is abundant and now it's yours.
Glory time's coming for to stay. On that great, great come and get it day. Come and get it, come and get it, come and get it, come and get it.
Says
come and get it, come and get it, come and
says
get
in the
it, come
book
and
it
get it,
says,
come and get it, come and get it, come
a
and
mighty
get it,
morning
come and
is
get it,
nigh.
come and get it, come and get it.
Universal 4th of July. Gonna get your freedom and high.
Bells will ring in every steeple. What a day for people in overalls. Come you free and you equal people. Come and get your gravy and 2 meatballs. On that great come and get it day. Won't it be fun when worry is done and money is hay? That's the time things will come your way. On that great, great come and get it day. My gown will be a calico gown. My feet will dance all over the town.
Come from Gabriel's horn. The earth beneath your plow is abundant and now is yours.